We remind you this wonderful Friday, October 27th. This is Jeremy Martin, Vice President for Americas. We're delighted to bring you the latest in our energy webinar series. And we're going to get into a topic that is a very interesting topic and has been one under debate and discussion and conversation for, I would say, decades in Latin America. And that's the broad term or the broad concept of privatization. And so we're happy to have Alvaro Rios joining us from Bolivia, as well as Kirk Schur, who's in Washington, D.C. We're going to have Kirk make some introductory remarks. But just in the way of background, I wanted to set the table. And the Institute of the Americas, for over 25 years, has been working on energy issues in Latin America. And the concept of privatization and how governments use privatization and why privatization is seen as a policy option often for governments is one that's received a lot of attention and scrutiny in some countries more than others. But the fact is, with the Washington Consensus and the economic tenets of the Washington Consensus in the 90s, we saw a whole wave of privatization or capitalization, as it was called in some markets, and the role of government receding from the energy sector and particularly in terms of state-owned enterprises being taken over and the transfer of assets to private industry. That was, let's say, the first wave in the late 80s, 90s. And then there was the decades of the 2000s where we saw perhaps the pendulum swinging back the other way to some renationalizations, nationalizations, expropriations. But now what we want to talk about today, and we're delighted to have Alvaro and Gas Energy Latin America show their research with us or share their research with us on what we're calling a new privatization wave. And so where governments in the region, countries in the region are again looking at why and perhaps it could be useful to engage in processes of transfer of state-owned enterprise to private control. For example, there's a big debate underway in Brazil with Eletrobras and what is the right privatization model for Eletrobras. And not that long ago in Colombia, Isagen was, from state control to private ownership. So those are just a couple examples we'll get into across pretty much the entire energy value chain, upstream, hydrocarbons, midstream, but also downstream, and in terms of the electric sector and the various segments of the electric sector. So I don't want to take too much more time. I will let Kirk Schur do a little bit more of the introduction of this research that Gas Energy Latin America has been working on that Alvaro will present. So Kirk, with that, and thanks for joining us. Good to be back in touch with Kirk, a longtime friend and colleague and somebody many of you probably know well if you've ever been to DC. So Kirk, over to you.
Jeremy, thank you very much. We've had some audio troubles. I want to make sure that everything is okay and that everyone can hear me. I would follow up on your remarks by saying that, again, my name is Kirk Schur. I work at a consulting company called Clearview Strategy Group, and we're helping Gas Energy Latin America expand their market reach into the United States, and also at the same time working with Gas Energy Latin America to bring investment to the region, not just in terms of the privatizations, but across a range of activities. One of the factors I would highlight in this round in the region, this round of privatizations, is that not all governments are calling them that. So they're going under the name of farm-ins in the case of certain upstream assets in Mexico and beyond, or public-private partnerships in some cases. And a few governments are coming up with novel names to avoid the word privatization. In any case, literally there are tens of billions of dollars that will be put, of different types of assets, as Jeremy highlighted, that will be put into the hands of investors over the next few years around the entire region. And Gas Energy Latin America is unique in that its advisors are present in all the major markets and have been there for decades. So without any further ado, I think around the region, their experience over the last several decades prepares them well for this round of, again, whether it's privatization or public-private partnership or farm-outs in the case of upstream. Looking forward to a very interesting set of opportunities that they'll be presenting now for investors in the U.S. That's it for me, Jeremy.
Thank you, Kirk. Thank you so much, and delighted to have you with us. And thanks for those clarifications. You make an interesting point about the nomenclature and how, because of perhaps what transpired in the 90s and how Washington consensus is sort of a dirty concept or dirty word, and so is in some markets privatization. So ways that the same basic tenets can be leveraged, but by not necessarily calling it privatization. Some interesting points. This moment would like to go over to Alvaro Rios. Let me just give a little brief background, Alvaro, before you launch into your presentation. I'm sure most folks online are well aware of Alvaro's background and training as an engineer. He's Bolivian, and he was at one point the Minister of Hydrocarbons, and I believe that was in the Mesa government, if I'm not mistaken. So Alvaro was in the government during the height of some of the policy debates in Bolivia over the role of natural gas, and particularly the role of the state in developing and utilizing its natural gas resources. He was also the executive secretary of the Latin American Energy Organization, OLADE, which is the grouping of all the energy ministries of the region into an organization that works on a variety of policy and technical issues associated with energy policy and energy markets in Latin America. So he definitely knows his way around not only the upstream, but pretty much all the value chain of the energy sector in the region. And since that time, he's been a founding partner of Gas Energy Latin America. So Alvaro, I'll leave it to you at this point to help us understand what the amazing opportunities are in this new wave of privatization across the region.
Okay. Can you hear me well first?
Yes, perfectly.
Okay.
Coming loud and clear.
Okay, very good. Good afternoon, good evening, good morning. I don't know what part of the world you're in, but I'm glad to be here, and Jeremy, in touch with you again and with the Institute of the Americas. I will probably be seeing you in Rio in a week or week and a half or something like that. And of course, we're glad to be here and to share some of our thoughts of some research we have done. And for that, we have prepared a 20 slide PowerPoint presentation, which I don't know how to move. Giovanna, can you help me? How do I move the slides?
Alvaro, can you see the word?
Oh, okay, that's really, yeah,
okay,
really good. Oh, good. We can switch over to some questions that Jeremy will translate to me. We will do just 2 to 3 slides of who we are, and then we will go into a region overview, which Jeremy and Kirk have already done, but we will introduce a few more concepts, and then we will go into a country summary on the work we have done in the countries you see there listed below. Okay. What we have, Gas Energy Latin America has been in business 10 years now. We have a nice 3 headquarter office, I would say, in Lima, Luis heading it, in Caracas with Antero heading it, with a lot of work down there. Everybody would be surprised. And me here in Bolivia with my team, and then we have a nice set of associated consultants in the rest of the countries, and of course Kirk with us, trying to get us into the US market and also helping us a lot with the renewable energy. Okay, we just want to go that we have a lot of multi-client reports, very nicely structured on all those countries you're seeing on the screen, and they are quarterly PowerPoint, which are subscription based, and our clients like it because they're very in-depth reports on the energy sector on those countries. So this is what provides us very updated, okay? And right now what we did, and we were able to do this presentation because we have we're putting out our market report that we're almost ready to complete on this report, which we called it, Kirk helped me put the title, it says Catching the Privatization Wave. But this is not really only privatization, asset divestment. It also has to do a lot with a lot of incentives, new laws and regulations that are being in place along with privatization that make, I think, the region quite interesting to study for 2007 and beyond, I would say. Okay, so where do I go? I get it wrong. Okay, there we go. That's the report we will have in place I would say in about 30-40 days. It will be very ready to go out in the market, and I will present you a summary of that. Okay, with that in mind, I would just go to the region overview, and what I would like to say is that most Latin American countries, as a result of high commodity prices, have moved into a very nationalistic process, introduced a lot of subsidies into their systems, changed some rules and regulations to capture more rental income, and really closed some doors to private investment. And this allowed the state companies to do much of the necessary investment. So this was the model for the past, I would say, 10 years that has been in our region. The drastic fall in oil and natural gas prices and other factors such as a drop in reserves and production, supply deficits, shortages, deteriorating infrastructure, reduced fiscal income, negative balance sheets and debt in the energy state companies had made countries and governments to become pragmatic. Okay, and as Jeremy said, this set of new changes and rules and asset divestments are not coming from imposed conditions from outside, but really from pragmatism that we understand that we cannot do it alone, and so we need to have really a lot of private investment along going with our national entities or national power and oil companies. Okay, I would say that most Latin American countries at this stage have made or are already making adjustments in their legal and regulatory framework to attract private investment. We will touch this country by country. In addition, they have begun privatization processes in some countries stronger than others, and also divestments through the energy value chain. And as Kirk said, this have given different names, farm outs, joint ventures, PPPs, and all sorts of names. And the word privatization really hurts in our hearts, because some of the privatizations in our region were done in the past, in the 90s, so rapidly that really did not favor the country. So this time the processes are much more slower and much more cautiously studied, as you will see. Okay, so in this Gas Energy is finalizing this new market report called the Catching the Privatization Wave. Like I said, it will be available, I would say, at the end of November for next year. And in this market report, we present an in-depth analysis with incentives approved and under study to encourage private investment in the private sector. Also, the report lists and details assets that are currently under privatization or are considering to be sold because of technical difficulties and other conditions. Okay? And so below we will present a brief summary of this market report and that we would like to share with you. Okay? So we will start with Argentina, I believe. We tried to do alphabetically, but we couldn't do it. My people are looking at me. So we will just start giving you a background on Argentina country overview, okay? Argentina for the past decade has been probably jointly with Venezuela really discouraging for private investment. And And some of the reasons you can see listed on the screen. And really, one time I was trying to get a Colombian company to invest in Argentina. I said, and somebody, the company responded to me, I'd rather go and invest in Afghanistan. So that was rather interesting to hear. But that trend is changing so quickly with the new Macri administration that really it's incredible to see how companies from all over the world are looking at Argentina with a new eye. Okay, that doesn't mean that they will invest, but they're starting to look quite strongly, and some investment is already taking place. Okay, so there were strong subsidies to energy needs. There were a lot of labor regulations, exchange rates that were controlled. There was default in the country. Argentina became a net importer of energy, causing really serious disruptions in its macroeconomic conditions, had a lot of deteriorated infrastructure and shortages of energy, of course, as everybody knows, and many other things that are common sense, or common knowledge, I would say. Argentina have created a lot of incentives to encourage investment. I would say these have really happened in the last 12 months. Labor agreements in Vaca Muerta and other basins and provinces. Clear objectives for the introduction of renewable energy with goals, with targets, and backup conditions to secure private investment. I mean, it's not only that you go and bid in for projects. These projects have the backup of even international finance organizations in order to get a credibility to do the investment. It's gradually lifting the subsidies. In December of this year, we will have another lift of electric sector subsidies, and it's going more towards a cost structure that works. Oil parity with international prices just happened last time. Favorable pricing for Vaca Muerta production, favorable gas pricing for Vaca Muerta production. Introduction of you can now introduce some type of used equipment to exploration activity. This is some of the incentives that Argentina has introduced in order to make investment attractive to the country. In addition to many microeconomic solutions, such as the convertibility, default, and other things that you probably are aware of. Macri's recent approval will certainly encourage investment in Argentina, as we already seen with 2 calls we have received from 2 companies to invest, one in the power sector and one in Vaca Muerta. What is going on in privatization and asset divestment assets in Argentina? Basically, we will concentrate that in YPF. YPF had, I would say, 60–70% of the areas in Vaca Muerta and in Argentina. So a lot of these areas are going out for farm out, whether they are under new exploration, under production, with pilot wells, with a lot of things. YPF is farming out many of these areas to the private sector. Also, some of the provincial state companies that have acreage are releasing these and are farming out totally or partially to private investors that come with the technology and financial conditions behind them. Okay, and their carryover, the carryover that they have with the area is all the time less and less. A few assets in the power sector belonging to the state are considering for privatization. We have learned that. And also natural gas transportation and distribution systems are also in line for study and for association or transfer to the private sector. So this is Argentina, which has never let go the private sector from the country, really is trying to get more private investment, and this is happening throughout the value chain. Okay. What we see in Argentina in business opportunities is really Hela and our consulting firm believes that. Why is Brazil there? What happened to Brazil? Oh, okay. Sorry for the word. This we think we believe that there is 3 countries that have really created and will use much of the resources with the new incentives and also with the asset sales and the privatization. Argentina is one of them. Sorry for the word that I should say Argentina there. And we believe there is opportunities in the whole value chain, including renewable energy. We see it throughout, and I think this, as this year ends and next year comes, we will see that tendency very strong. Hotels are pretty filled up in Argentina with new investors looking to invest in infrastructure, in new exploration, in renewable energy mainly. So what we would say is that Argentina is becoming a new oasis for future investment, and we hope that goes on. And also YPF, as you know, is a well-managed state company and has very good technical background, and of course has a lot to offer in partnerships, especially mainly in sharing production of gas and also in farming out some of the blocks they have worked on. Okay, so we now will go into Bolivia, my country, and I will go into the next slide. And I would say as a country overview that Bolivia, due to its high natural gas reserves discovered over 12 years ago, has been able to monetize these reserves into the Argentina and Brazil markets, as everybody knows. Then Bolivia has nationalized its hydrocarbon industry and has created new taxes at the wellhead and has brought large income into the country that has brought a lot of economic and social prosperity. If you see our economic growth is one of the largest in the region, and this is due still to money that was collected, and we had $6 billion exports of gas just 2013, 2014, and the government has made reasonable use, and there is internal reserves of money which are being deployed now when prices went down. However, exploration has not kept up with production, and some of its major gas fields are starting to decline. And the national company, YPFB, has reduced drastically its income due to reduced price and export volumes. And most of the investments in Bolivia are done by its ENDE and YPFB, the power and oil companies, state oil companies, with the exception only that some exploration and production activity is done by some key players that are in our market, such as Total, Repsol, I would say Shell, are still present in the Bolivian marketplace, okay? However, the 2 main demand markets for natural gas, Brazil and Argentina, are also undergoing deep changes, and gas will have to turn very competitive. So what is Bolivia has done and what is doing? And last year in 2016, a law was approved to lift the prices for oil and condensate towards getting more price for the condensate that was very low. So the price that the companies get remuneration for oil and gas are much higher than much higher than international pricing. So this has one economical strong incentive for some of the projects that are being developed now. Also, exploration in protected parks areas has been open and through a supreme decree where in highly potential areas. And also compensation and timing mechanism for environmental approvals and to compensate communities have have been targeted in detail. So Bolivia is not Peru in this sense. Bolivia has strict control, and investments are not delayed, as in the case of Chile and Peru, for example, which we have a deep problem there to commit investment. We will touch that when we get to Peru in particular. A new arbitrage law has been put in place to secure and to get guarantees to investment. And the government is continuously announcing the approval of a new hydrocarbon and electric law to further encourage investment. Okay. On the privatization and investment opportunities, I would say that Bolivia to date is not considering any privatization processes or asset divestment. See, however, some of the reserve areas that YPFB had, we see that some of these areas are strongly trying to be promoted to get investment jointly with YPFB subsidiaries, for example, Chaco and Andina. Similarly, in the electric sector, some ideas are being generated in order for the National Electric Company, ENDE, to start in partnership for future export development projects, for example. These are just some thoughts we hear in the air, but they may happen this year or the year after. We consider that investment business opportunities in Bolivia are in the exploration side due to the drop in reserves and production, where we have a very high productivity of fields and markets with developed infrastructure. So this is where we think in Bolivia there is a strong opportunities that could companies use to invest in the country. Okay, we will then move on to Brazil, right, Savannah? Okay, so Brazil is really compelling. We will say we can talk a lot about as the country overview. Brazilian economy has been in recession for the past 3 years and is trying. We see some signs of recuperation, even though strong political instability in Brazil. And what everybody believes is that this model would not change. And Petrobras and Electrobras are highly in-depth companies that really need to do a lot of things, and all the monopolistic that they had over the power and the hydrocarbon sector has and will be removed. Okay, there is no turning point from this, and Brazil is going to a strong reform to capture private investment. I think everybody knows that. So we can see that a lot of regulatory changes are being implemented and will continue to be implemented to end Petrobras and Electrobras monopoly in the energy sector. New terms for exploration activity have been put in place. Some lifting of subsidies also have taken place a year and a half ago. The Gas to Grow program is under study and implementation to encourage a lot of private investment into the natural gas sector. Flexibilization on local content. ANP, a more independent regulator with Decio Odoni running it and promoting many other investments in the country, especially in the upstream sector. So Brazil is going through this massive regulatory change in spite of the political instability and the economic downturn they had for the past 3 years. What is going on in Brazil? I think a lot of it going on in Brazil, and I think Brazil is going through a massive privatization and asset divestment process in all the value chains, natural gas assets throughout, pipelines, LNG facilities, petrochemical assets, power assets, refinery assets. So a lot of things are going out for sale in Brazil, and some of these are having some difficulties in delays, but we don't see Brazil changing and going back to a strong monopolistic and controlled sector by Electrobras and Petrobras. That is not going to happen. So these assets slowly will go for sale and will go to the private sector. Okay. And what are the business opportunities? I said this. We believe that same as Argentina, that Brazil presents all sorts of investment opportunities that we have in our report. We have them listed with names, values, and things like that, that will have private participation in the future. The process is a little bit slow. Everybody would like to see it faster, but there is investment opportunities in the whole energy value chain, both taking advantage of incentives and also the divestment of assets by Petrobras, Electrobras, CEMIG, and some other state companies that are in place in Brazil. If we go on to Chile, as you know, Chile is already private. The whole energy value chain is in private hands, except for the role of ENAP in the hydrocarbon sector, with some gas production in the south, some refining activity, LNG imports. And Chile, as everybody knows, is turning strongly to renewable energy. 20% commitment, same as Argentina, strongly encouraging and putting laws in place with clear objectives for renewable energy. Supply is not a concern due to oversupply now in the power sector, because also of weak economic growth. There are many social and community problems that are delaying projects. This is somehow a block to new projects coming in. There is 3 instances that are needed to deploy a project: environmental permits, environmental courts, and ordinary justice. So this has really become a cumbersome country to really deploy, especially the large projects, and this is also true for mining projects. Okay. What would say that Chile is doing to incentive and encourage investment? Of course, it's all plays in the renewable energy arena. So clear objectives, bid with time blocks. For example, they give hourly blocks that encourage investment. A new transition law has recently approved that really you will have access to the energy grid. A new electric law is under study to encourage private investment in renewable energy, especially more towards distributed generation. Okay, and this is all Chilean efforts are now encouraged to renewable energy, with some efforts in the south to encourage investment in natural gas production out in Chile. Okay? What are the business opportunities? Like I said, the renewable sector will continue, and especially in the downsize, in the small size homes, supermarkets, industries are moving towards generating part of this energy needs from renewable energy. Also, smoke, because of renewable energy and lower demand, LNG has become oversupply, and of course they're taking advantage of that and converting a few fleets and chain equipment into natural gas usage. So there's a strong activity from the LNG chain in Chile, trying to convert fleets to natural gas. And we also see a partnership of future projects with ENAP in the power and the hydrocarbon sector are foreseen. Also, the sector are foreseen. Okay, we will now. Jeremy, how much more time do we have?
Well, I think we've got about 10 minutes or so before we get to the discussion part. So if you want to, maybe 15 minutes max.
I'll take 10 to 15 minutes max. Okay.
Okay.
We go over to Colombia, and I think the Achilles heel of Colombia is geology. Okay, a lot of private investment has gone into the upstream with, I would say, not very good results. Even offshore and onshore, there were massive investments. I mean, when the region was going nationalistic and towards state-driven, Colombia was opening up with Peru. And so, but the efforts in exploratory activity from Ecopetrol and private companies really did not get the results that everybody expected. Some results have been done and have been successful in the Caribbean basin. However, that will take long term to develop, 7, 8, 9, 10 years. Despite these discoveries in natural gas and oil reserves, production for both are declining and reserves are declining. So, I mean, the country needs the royalties from these commodity exports, and of course, Colombia economy is being hurt by lower oil prices and drop in production as well. So what is Colombia doing? They already moved, even though they have most of the assets in the chain in private sector. There is also a lot of state power and Ecopetrol, of course, are there. And for E&P activities, Colombia reacted quite rapidly, and a lot of incentives were thrown in. They cut exploration deadlines. They adjust guarantees and or commitments on guarantees that were put in place to delay projects, and then this doesn't affect the continuity of the contract. So basically, they wanted to keep the companies not from fleeing the country. Allocation of areas directly versus rounds. This is something that is happening as opposed to having to wait for the bid rounds that everybody remember them from past 8, 9 years ago. NIH will have these very successful bid rounds. Now, because they want to move faster, they are awarding them directly. Efficiency programs for exploration projects have been introduced for development of exploration activities. And environmental regulation and fiscal systems are being studied to encourage future fracking production. I think that's where we will see Colombia in moving towards on onshore activity. In generation projects, normally tenders according to the projections on medium-term projects are foreseen, not in the short term. Privatization of Electricaribe is something that we think will happen, and Isagen and some other power assets may continue being introduced for privatization, depending on the country's income needs. Okay, Ecopetrol is strongly open to funds and to reduce risks, and polypropylene asset Zenit is possible for sale. And also we see that 2008, maybe the Zenit company that was created may also become for open for partnership, or maybe as a selling of part of the shares of the company. That is something we also foresee coming, and we heard talks about it. Okay, where are the business opportunities in Colombia? I think fracking is one area you will see. 2008, we see that that is being driven quietly and carefully. Also, natural gas activities of small LNG will be developed 2018 and on, and some power development will be power development sector will be minimal. So we don't foresee a lot of activities in Colombia in this area. So moving on rather quickly to Ecuador. Macroeconomic conditions in Ecuador are quite critical. Most investments in the past decade have been performed by the state or energy state companies such as such as Petroecuador or Petroamazonas. Ecuador is highly in debt, and part of its future oil production is compromised already. And the country under the current administration is immersed in studying restructuring conditions to encourage private investment. We see that a new model for contract for exploration is being studied to bring investment into the exploration arena. PPP's strategy is also an alternative to manage some of the electric assets that have been built over the past 7-8 years. Also, PPP of assets are studied to manage some of the assets that had technical difficulties in the construction or in the operation phase. So they're waiting for somebody. I think they will come and say who wants to come repair and operate this asset. So a few gas stations have been sold last year and this year, and some other downstream assets will become available in the future as the country faces out difficulties in the budget. Investment opportunities will start appearing, we believe, this 2018, as we from our people there, we see that that is being studied, and to bring a new economic model for the country. And just to start finishing, I will be brief on Mexico. That's the country probably everybody knows the best, and we know the least. It's a little far away from our focus of activity, which is more the South America. And I will just comment very briefly is that Mexico is having strong political difficulties in NAFTA negotiation with the US. New elections with a leftist government with possibilities to win may slow private investment. Mexico is one of the largest producers of oil and gas, however, declining production as well as in Venezuela. Mexico energy reform has been, we will say, successful with the compromise of ending Pemex and CFE's monopoly. That is still something that is to be seen. And renewable energy is becoming widely introduced in Mexico. What is Mexico done? I mean, you guys are very familiar, especially the ones living in the United States, with Mexico energy reform. And I think several tenders for E&P were successful. New incentives all the time are created when bid rounds are given. Consultation with the companies are in place. And in the power sector also, 2 tenders in 2016. The regulatory bodies are allowing investment in this sector. So we think that Mexico, along with Brazil and Argentina, will continue to drive. The only question is to see what if Mr. Obrador really goes into power, what his decisions are over private investment and the energy reform. And like we said, we would like to summarize is that similar to Argentina and Brazil, there are strong business opportunities in the whole energy change. However, the only question is what will happen, Mr. Manuel López Obrador, if he becomes on power, okay? With this, we will move on to Peru. Peru was the jewel of the crown, that's how you say in English, 8-9 years ago when Camisea project started. Peru still has very stable conditions for private investment, very stable macroeconomic conditions. However, we see little governance. I mean, presidents and are not willing to introduce changes. There is very, I would say the private sector in Peru is very conflicting with each other, and they really don't bring any solutions to the government. The governments are very weak. We even see Mr. Kuczynski very weak and not able to take decisions, and governance in Peru is a problem. Environmental permits and previous consultation has been very detrimental for investment, not only in the oil and gas exploration. There is several fields that cannot monetize the gas because a few oyster growers do not allow it. So there's not a strong government to say this has been granted and these companies want to monetize. So everything is really, I would say, down the drain because of this opposition that has nothing to do with the environment. It has to do more with interests and political interests, okay? Renewable energy was introduced a couple of years ago when there was good pricing with preferential conditions, and several mining projects like mining projects in Gasoducto del Sur Peruano have been postponed, and we don't know if they will be materialized, okay? Peru, to encourage investment, Peru has tried to implement better conditions for environmental permits and previous costs unsuccessfully. Okay, we need to change that. Not successfully. They cannot solve these problems they have. Fiscal modifications are being studied for the hydrocarbon to encourage. I think we will have a law next year or late this year with new fiscal terms for exploration activity. Some flexibility in the importation of equipment for exploration activity has been put in place for companies not to leave exploration areas. Peru Petro has finally started awarding areas without bids, same as in Colombia. And this will continue, we believe. Peru is giving cross subsidies for massive utilization of natural gas. That's an area that is also being studied. Petrochemical incentives are being studied, and maybe we will see something coming 2018. Also, the penetration of renewable energy with preferential conditions is being studied, and I think that will happen in a more competitive manner. So, as far as privatizations, Peruvian energy sector is mostly in private hands. Petroperu and Electroperu will not privatize any assets as they are profitable, and Petroperu may have some of the assets for concession, such as the storage tanks. Maybe the Northern Peruvian pipeline will go into concession to the private sector, so you will see some of that. We really are sad to see Peru move from a really wave of massive private investment really into going into things that are not moving forward, okay? And last, our favorite, Venezuela, okay? Antero is in the line there with me. He's very active in Venezuela. And you know that Venezuela has some of the key things to become really have a nice, strong energy sector. However, it has strong deficits of energy. The country is down deep in economical and social and political problems. All due to lack of investment, there's a drop in hydrocarbon production. Strong energy subsidies still in the country. All revenues are allocated for debt payments, and PDVSA investment is really minimal. So with this in mind, some of the things that are happening, and we call it hidden privatizations or hidden deals. Freedom of gas exports in spite of internal deficit. That's something that is going on. Service companies are studying incremental production mechanism under the account and to collect past debt. So there is the money doesn't go into PDVSA, it goes into an escrow account, and there's an escrow account, should be there. An escrow account to collect money and also collect past debts, so if they increase production, they can get paid from this escrow account. There are not really laws or open regulation to encourage the investment, but it's done on individual agreements with the private sector. Some oil blocks are given away to international companies as promise for debt and future loans. That is what is happening there. And also, yes, just to end, PDVSA offers business opportunities to service companies and a number of international companies on a one-to-one basis. See, we call it hidden privatization or hidden deals. LNG exports are being studied by a few major companies, especially on the on the side, and also exports of gas to Colombia. And Venezuela will sooner or later require massive investment similar to Argentina to recuperate infrastructure that is getting obsolete and not up to date. And so one day, like Argentina, somebody will have to come and really work something different that works for the energy sector in Venezuela. Well, thanks very much. We hope we provided a nice overview. Like I said, the details of all these are concentrated in our report.
Alvaro, thank you. That was a tour de force. We covered, I lost count of how many countries, but a large number of countries with extremely detailed insights on background and opportunities. Thank you for walking us around all of those opportunities. A couple of questions here that have already arrived, and so obviously, folks, if you want to pose questions, use that chat function there, and obviously several folks have already done so. Let me begin with a question from Oscar about transmission. He makes an interesting point. We talked at the outset about sort of the earlier waves of privatization. When it came to the power sector, transmission tended to be that kept in state control, or the state-owned enterprises in transmission were not at that point transferred to private ownership, whereas distribution and generation tended to be in the markets. So the question, Oscar, is how has the change in thinking been justified? And could you explain a little bit in terms of the justification for private investment in transmission, electric transmission, I should specify?
Okay. Jeremy, I personally, with the group that we have not really talked anything about transmission, particularly because we don't see that an area that the countries want to transfer that to the private sector, because it's really the cordón umbilical. How do you say that in English? I can't say the thing that bonds. Yeah, umbilical cord. There we go. The umbilical cord and the transmission lines are not going for private, and I think some of the assets that we built, new assets for transmission, will still be done by state power companies. Okay, so we don't see really any trend in that direction, and it's really something that the states will keep control over.
Okay, thank you. So let me ask the question that Hugo has posted here, and there's a question about we all are following especially here in North America, the news of the NAFTA discussions and the renegotiation that's underway between the United States, Mexico, and Canada. So the question is, what would happen to regional energy integration if NAFTA was indeed canceled? Or I guess what would be more specific is if the U.S. pulled out of NAFTA, because I think Canada and Mexico will remain. So what do the NAFTA countries in the energy sector, what impacts cancellation or the U.S. Breaking out of that agreement in terms of energy markets and regional integration?
The way we see is that NAFTA is just the North. North belongs to North America and also has implications just in Mexico. The rest of the region is outside of NAFTA. So what I will have to say is that I think Mexico has a lot to gain in the short to medium term from natural gas coming from cheap natural gas coming from the United States. Of course, this will delay natural gas exploration in Mexico, but I think seeing just new gas stations and new things coming into Mexico is really good. I mean, the new logos, the new brands that you see coming in, and the plans that a lot of companies have into Mexico to really modernize and make some of the gas stations, some of the pipeline trunk lines. And we see that, like I said, Mexico, we see that with Pemex and CFE, I think will continue to drive some partnerships with the private sector. I think that is the stage we see for coming, and they will not remain in control of their assets, but they like to share their assets and become more share the risk, not only in the exploration activity, but also on downstream activities. So I think that NAFTA is already in place. You will not see strong changes because natural gas producers, of course, are having strong lobby in Washington for NAFTA to change things in the energy sector.
Excellent. So you don't fear major changes in terms of opportunities for investment in energy investment, I should say, if NAFTA seems to unravel from the U.S. side. Let me move to
Not
this
really, Jeremy.
question.
No, just let me say that most of Latin America thinking is that out of things that are being proposed are just for the press. So a lot of things will not happen. So we just hear that there is a lot of talk, but a lot of action will not be real.
From your mouth, God's ears, they say. So let's talk about, Alfonso's posted an interesting question, and we've all seen this firsthand and academically, but Latin America, in terms of regional energy integration, was making huge strides. The 90s saw the Gaspol, the Bolivia-Brazil pipeline, Argentina pipelines with Chile, Bolivia pipelines with Argentina, Argentina pipelines with Brazil, transmission, et cetera, the Central American integration, electric integration. What do you envision? The question is, what do you envision opportunities for regional integration in Latin America today? And so we know the sort of legacy and the history, but what's the new integration look like?
Yeah, the new wave of integration.
Yeah, we like waves.
Yeah. Okay, what you have to look is at the business model, especially of the Southern Cone. When I say Southern Cone, I will have to talk about Peru, Chile, Brazil, Uruguay, Bolivia, and Brazil. Okay, that's the Southern Cone for us. And this Southern Cone, transactions of all kinds, LPG, gasoline, electricity, natural gas, will be done on a more commercial basis than on a political or a government-to-government relationship. Okay, for example, but this has an explanation. Okay, Brazil is trying to attract private investment, and if you have here the Minister of Energy negotiating gas prices with Bolivia, private investors that are trying to come into Brazil and that Brazil is trying to attract will probably say, hey, wait, this is not commercial. This is not something, this is out of the market. So, for example, on the Bolivia-Brazil pipeline, we see that Petrobras will just buy enough gas to fulfill some of its needs, but it will not be that the ministers and YPFB and Petrobras will negotiate another contract. That is out of the line. Same thing happens in the electric sector, okay? We don't see any exchanges of electricity being done government to government. We see that the private sector, and if the state company, if Bolivia wants to export electricity to Argentina, for example, we see that it has to go into the bidding processes that are for getting firm energy into the different countries. Also, spot energy will, in the interconnected lines, and Bolivia, I think, will get interconnected with Argentina. And then you have a whole grid there of switches, of interchanges of electric power. And hopefully one day, and we see it very far, but Peru will not integrate with Chile. I think that is in the past. We see that Chile will become sort of an independent with solar energy. They have so much to gain for solar energy, back up with some LNG or some other of these combinations, that we don't see really Peru interconnecting neither the pipeline, neither with an electric line to the Southern Cone.
Wow, interesting, because that's obviously been on the table, at least a small electric interconnection between Peru and Chile. Well, thank you for that. And Alvaro, we out of time, but there's one more question that's been posed here I want to conclude with. Alvaro wants to understand, in your analysis of Argentina, and I think we've all seen the Renovar renewables auctions gain a lot of attention and a lot of attractive bids. What besides renewables could be the coming energy investments in Argentina?
Oh, Vaca Muerta by far. Infrastructure, power, transmission lines, distribution lines. I mean, those are old. They need new lines. I mean, there's new generation needed, distributed generation. Also, natural gas transportation lines need a lot of looping, a lot of construction there in Argentina, and also natural gas distribution companies need a lot of massive deployment for all this time that they haven't invested anything. So there is a renovation of infrastructure and new infrastructure needed in both the power sector and gas sector, okay, besides renewable energy. And also there's a lot to do in Vaca Muerta and maybe the Chubut province as well, that is negotiating a new labor deal with the authorities.
And the midterm elections this past Sunday, it seems like the Macri Cambiemos coalition gained some stature in the Congress. It seems like the public is in support of his economic policies. So
Yeah,
that should perhaps aid too.
Yeah, Jeremy, we're running out of time, but it was incredible. I mean, the Minister of Energy of Argentina was announcing increases prices of natural gas and electricity, and they still got voted. So this is really understanding, I think, corruption, and that most Argentinians believe that a new economic model is needed. I think that is what drove the election, and we hope so, because we need our state oil companies, we need our energy companies, state, but we also need a lot of private investment along in partnership or in individual investments, but the region needs private investment, and I think this is a new opportunity. It's not done suddenly, it's not forced from outside, but it's done internally from inside the countries.
I think that's a great summation, but I don't want to let you go with a question about lithium in Bolivia. I know it wasn't part of the presentation, but we talk a lot about the role of electric vehicles in the coming years. And one of the key inputs is lithium, and so Bolivia is said to have some of the world's largest lithium reserves. So if you could just spend a minute, if you could, with what you understand, not just in terms of the reserves, but what this government in Bolivia is perhaps thinking about doing with lithium.
Yeah, lithium reserves have been trying to be developed for a long time, even since 1994. Lithium company tried to develop, and it didn't get awarded. And now our government, Presidente Evo Morales, they're trying to do something that's state-driven, and I think that entity they have created, they have to, from my opinion, they have to bring partners to partner with that entity that has been created and has developed some activity in Salar de Uyuni, where the lithium reserves are. If that doesn't happen, that will not be developed fully, and I think we don't have the technical, neither the financial resources to do it alone. So it will be nice to see this entity, Salar, it's called Evaporítico Salar de Uyuni. There's an entity that has done investments already. So it'll be nice for this entity to partner with different companies from around the world to do batteries, to do exploitation, and to do some value-added aggregation in Bolivia. We still will see where the government wants to bring us.
That's a 100% state-owned enterprise that's working on that?
Yeah, 100%, yes.
Okay. Excellent. So perhaps a public-private partnership opportunity that could be part of the future conversation.
Sure.
We'll certainly keep
several sections, so. Batteries, exploitation, okay, and processing. I think this is it. Well, thank you, Jeremy, and thank you for all everybody that had listened to us, and we will have our report ready in about 45 more days.
Excellent. Well, thank you, Alvaro Rios, for your presentation. Thanks, everyone at Gas Energy Latin America, Kirk Schur, and thanks to Jacqueline Sanchez here at the Institute for working on this behind the scenes. Quick reminder, actually, in just about 10 days, we'll be convening a discussion in Brazil about a lot of these same issues. The potential Electrobras privatization, as well as the gas para cocher model developments in Brazil. Hope you can join us in Rio November 8th. And then also similarly, some of the renewable energy market developments in Mexico. We're going to have a breakfast panel and discussion on December 8th in Mexico City. Thank you all so much for joining us. Hope to see you again online. Stay tuned for announcements about future webinars. And of course, don't hesitate to join us in person, whether it's in Brazil or Mexico. And it's never too late to, it's never too early to flag and save the date for the La Jolla Conference, 23rd, 24th of May, 2018. Thanks, everyone, for joining us. Have a wonderful afternoon and enjoy your weekend.